Statues of America's founding fathers defaced, torn down, removed, stored in trash dumps. The formerly fair and balanced American press has become unapologetically aligned with the left. Freedom of speech on college campuses is dead. Illegal invaders enjoy citizenship rights. And don't think they haven't been voting the last couple of weeks. Professional athletes have savaged the American flag and the way of life that made them multimillionaires. Police departments are being defunded as U.S. citizens frantically arm themselves. And yet none of this should surprise anyone who's been paying attention. And I haven't let off of it since March. For many years, we Americans have been warned that a plot to subvert America really was unfolding. That we needed conviction and courage to confront it before it reached critical mass. Sadly, however, Americans never seem to react in a timely manner to an existential threat like a Hitler, a Hirohito, an Osama bin Laden, a Barack Obama, and Lord knows how many others. Decades ago, April 3rd, 1969, writer G. Edward Griffin, author of The Fearful Master and nearly 50 other books, lectured about this effort to subvert America. As early as 1928, international communism identified exploiting race relations in the U.S. as the key to this plot. And Griffin explained that the purpose of the widespread riots of 68 and 69 was to compel the U.S. to move gradually and legally toward socialism. And that the building of socialism in America was the communist revolution. Griffin was especially concerned with black studies programs, which teach a revisionist, Marxist view of U.S. history that frames whites as oppressors and blacks as perpetual victims and encourages a separate black national identity. That then were gaining traction at American universities. In the early 1980s, former KGB operative and defector Yuri Bezimov, who became known as Thomas Schumann, instructed that the Soviets were waging total psychological warfare against the U.S., employing the strategy of the ancient Chinese military theorist Sun Tzu, that subversion, destroying your enemy from within, was superior to military conquest. Bezmenov explained that the ultimate purpose of subversion was to negate the common sense and the critical faculties of American citizens so thoroughly that we could not protect ourselves. Subversion, you see, seeks to divide constituent social groups, blacks versus whites, women versus men, gays versus heterosexuals, all in order to spawn distrust, dissension, dysfunction. In other words, identity politics. And U.S. members of academia, the media, and Hollywood elites are responsible for most of said subversion. Now, one must understand, subversion comprises four sequential phases. First, demoralization, in which the population, for a period of anywhere from 15 to 30 years, is brainwashed with Marxist propaganda that is not counterbalanced with patriotic American ideology. Marxist teaching infiltrates the enclaves of American society where public opinion and culture are formed, including and almost especially education, religion, social life, the administrative state and government, the military, law enforcement, labor-employer relations. Subversion insists upon a spurious standard of equality that all constituent U.S. social groups comprising race, gender, religion, and sexual orientation should all experience equal outcomes, and that any disparities necessarily result from systemic white oppression. For example, if Hispanic women in America do not earn the same average per capita income as a group as do white men, systemic white racism, white privilege account for this discrepancy. Principal goals of subversion include undermining religion and belief in God, injecting Marxism into education while curtailing the study of socially useful subjects such as math, science, foreign languages, and displacing elected, politically accountable authorities with non-elected social actors such as the media. Subversion attacks law and order by stigmatizing the arresting officer while vindicating the criminal. Labor unions are subverted when they strike to promote ideological causes rather than legitimate worker demands. Bezmenov said in 1984 that Americans had already been thoroughly demoralized. The second subversion, or the second sequential phase, destabilization, inserts the government incrementally into the lives of Americans, promising more benefits and entitlements, thereby inducing Americans to rely ever more extensively upon government assistance in all aspects of their lives. And at the time, Bezmenov viewed the destabilization process as well underway. How many years ago was that? 1984. The third phase, crisis, contemplates a change in power. We're just over a week away from an event that may create that change in power or may not. All preceded by cataclysmic events which have divided the country. Extensive chaotic rioting and looting resulting in martial law or a constitutional impasse may precede just such a crisis. Crisis usually leads to civil war or invasion by foreign armies, i.e. the United Nations. And the final phase, normalization, occurs when the socialist communist regime consolidates its authority and the citizenry accepts the new order. A classic example of normalization was when the Soviet tanks rolled into Prague in 1968. About the time I was head to the jungle. Leftist activist and communist ally Saul Alinsky wrote two influential books prescribing specific tactics to destabilize and destroy America. Reveille for Radicals in 1946 and Rules for Radicals in 1971. Author and cultural commentator Larry Alex Taunton's recent article entitled Understanding What is Happening in America, A Christian Response, summarized Alinsky's key principles, denouncing his strategy as evil. And well-known Alinsky-style community organizers include people like Barack Obama, Jane Sanders, the wife of Senator Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton wrote her college senior thesis on Alinsky. But most importantly, Alinsky emphasized in Reveille that radicals do not seek to improve or reform an existing and functioning society. Rather, radicals strive to realize an abstract, a visionary utopia to build the world of men's dreams. Radicals are devoted to an eternal war without either compromise or rules of fair play. And politics represent unconditional war, my friends. Radicals devote their energies exclusively to seizing power. Radicals cultivate conflicts among the races and the sexes and the social strata in order to destabilize. But the issues they employ for doing so, they're not the issues with which they are genuinely concerned. Rather, and as one Alinsky proponent explained, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always revolution. Key Alinsky tactics include: first, divide and conquer. Foster conflict, suspicion, and ill will among groups of people: black against white, women against men, poor against rich, immigrants against native-born. How Americans are divided does not matter, so long as they are put at conflict. Perceived income equality spawns a politics of envy. Number 2, create scapegoats. Identify persons who can be blamed for all grievances, both legitimate and imagined. Those would include people like President Trump, white people generally, Christians, of course, and vast right-wing conspiracies. Can you bring me my aluminum hat, please? Number 3, spawn chaos. Uncontrolled riots and looting foster uncertainty and instability. Moreover, they make current leaders appear either indecisive if they fail to control the violence, or as oppressors if they subdue it. Number 4, establish a movement. Give a virtuous veneer to a sordid agenda with mass appeal. Taunton writes thusly, so that no one can say that they oppose the movement. And we wind up with Black Lives Matter, with its Marxist-trained founders. Number 5, provoke retaliation. Taunt, ridicule opponents until they lash back, and then focus on their reactions as discrediting both them and their cause. Familiar recent examples include protesters vilifying the police, hoping to incite reactions that then are filmed and offered as proof of police brutality. All summer long, we've watched this. We've seen this antagonism go on. And these Antifa people and BLM people are sitting there with their damn smartphones taking pictures, movies of all this stuff. And if you haven't seen it, then you ain't been paying attention. Number 6, disseminate disinformation. As has been related, maintain an unrelenting campaign of public disinformation while accusing your enemies of deception. Keep them busy defending themselves while you move forward with your plans. Waste no crisis is number 7. Alinsky stressed that radicals must maintain flexibility and capitalize on opportunities as they may arise. A classic example, blaming Trump for the COVID-19 epidemic and the resulting economic injury. Number 8, overwhelm the system. Maintain constant, unrelenting pressure and eclipse the administrative capabilities of the government to cope with the problem. The purposeful chaos at the U.S. southern border in which caravans of immigrants seek asylum, while sanctuary U.S. cities attempt to protect illegals from federal law enforcement, exemplifies this very tactic. And the ninth tactic, seize power, which is done by presenting yourself as the solution to the chaos you created. Your bargain with the public is essentially this, that you will have no rest until we are in power. Examples include the Democratic Party's threat that the riots will continue and intensify until after the election, and the recurring Black Lives Matter chant, no justice, no peace. You see, my friends, the riots have been calculated to bring America to this crisis. You honest to God think that those people gave a damn about the death of George Floyd? It was the perfect excuse to kick this off for them and to explode with it. This backdrop, this calculating these riots to bring us to crisis, frames the current escalating riots as an attempt by the radical left to bring America to the crisis stage of subversion, coinciding with next Tuesday's election, 1 week from tomorrow. Except that's a bit of a joke, because cities and states around the country have already made an open door on voting. And whether it's by mail or people just dropping in to various different places all day and all night long, casting their votes. And there's no proper way to determine whether these voters are legal or otherwise. This country is going to civil war, people. And I'm not saying that because I'm sitting here, hey, I'm a broadcaster, I can say whatever I want. Wake up! It's smack in front of you. The call to defund and reimagine policing aligns with all of this objective. Amplifies general anxiety and instability. As the Claremont Institute's Matthew J. Peterson recently argued in his article, The Democratic Party Riots, the party cannot disown the riots now that their intensity and violence have escalated. You built it, you refused to condemn it, you asked for it. Meaning the Democrats, not those of you tuned in today. In August of this year, Victor Davis Hanson, a supposed classmate of Barack Obama, except that Hanson never saw Obama on campus or in the classroom that they allegedly shared. Hanson stated that Joe Biden had struck a devil's bargain with the radical left, and that the Democratic Party had mortgaged its soul to sponsor chaos in American streets in the hope of generating political capital. In a hearing recently before House Judiciary Committee, Attorney General William Barr challenged any Democratic member to denounce burning a federal courthouse. Not one responded. The choice next week is not between Donald Trump and a candidate with more conventional personality. Neither Reagan or John F. Kennedy is on the ballot. Instead, the choice is between a free, economically vibrant America with vast horizons and unrealized potential, and a dark, impoverished state peopled by classes of putative oppressors and victims, all of whom are obsessed with contrived grievances and reparations, disavowing God, and all deprived of every precious civil liberty and property right that our Constitution had guaranteed for the past 233 years, and for which countless American brothers and sisters of mine and yours have died. I could damn near end the show with that diatribe right now. I could do it. And I think you would understand why I'm not going to do that. But the fact of the matter is it could end. I'm going to make a couple of comments about an article that I published, I think over the weekend, on the 25th, so that's what, yesterday. It was a very involved piece to publish. later tonight. These are the reasons I suggest always having a paper, pen, or pencil handy, or a crayon to write on the refrigerator. I don't care where. I want you to go to Federal Observer later this evening, and there's an article up there on the front page entitled 10 Ways the Communist Manifesto is Infiltrated the United States of America. It's not real lengthy. I did a much better job publishing this thing than the original author did. I'm not taking away from that person. A man named Joe Jarvis. I got a lot of respect for Joe. There's times I've had some real issues. But as somewhat of a continuation of portions of what we just discussed, amongst their planks, the communists, free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. As the author says, this may be 10th on the list, but it's number 1 in ensuring that all the rest fall into place. You see, American communists got this goal in place just 4 years after the Communist Manifesto was published. 100 years before I was born. Communist Manifesto was published in 1848, and 4 years later, Massachusetts enacted the first compulsory public education law. And after that, it was only a matter of time until the population was indoctrinated to believe in whatever the government taught them. Now, I don't need to expound on this. I have a tape. This goes back over 20 years ago. I still have the recording. And each one of those children were told there will be no recording, no nothing. And one kid did it. I need to find a way to get that converted. And I've got the equipment, I just need to get to work with it. I need to get that thing converted into a format that we can play on the air. It is profound, my friends. Just about a quarter of a century ago. And that was sent to me by a very good friend, a very long-time listener. Although because we're not on shortwave, he doesn't listen anymore. He doesn't have a computer, does not want one. I don't blame the guy. But that's not the only part. So do read 10 Ways the Manifesto has Infiltrated the USA. You're going to find in many respects it is an extension of that which we've just spoken of. We're living in interesting times, my friends. I don't expect that the end is going to be good. We've already begun to experience the beginning of the end. Maybe that happened long before we thought it would. But given everything that took place in the 8 years prior to Donald Trump stepping into the White House, the rules were laid down. The rules for radicals. And boy, have they expanded. Trump became the excuse. George Floyd became the excuse. Statues commemorating many historical people in this nation. Stick around, I'll be back in a minute.